I opened the folder, slid it across the conference table, and said nothing. My father-in-law's attorney picked it up. I watched the color drain from his face one page at a time. Let me back up. My name is Simone. I'm 31 years old. I run a small but profitable e-commerce consulting firm out of my home office in Nashville, and until 8 months ago, I thought the worst thing my in-laws had ever done to me was show up 2 hours late to my wedding and blame traffic. I was wrong about that. I met my husband Philip at a friend's birthday dinner in 2018. He was quiet in that way that feels like depth when you're 24 and doesn't always turn out to be. He was kind to servers, tipped well, remembered small details. On our third date, he told me his family owned a mid-sized commercial real estate firm. His father, his uncle, and his older brother all ran it together, and that he'd recently stepped back from the business to pursue his own path in architecture. I thought that was brave. I thought a lot of things about Philip that I've since had to revise. We got married in June 2022. Small ceremony, backyard of my parents' house in Brentwood, fairy lights and a bluegrass band. His family came, dressed like they were attending a gala at the wrong venue. His mother wore a cream-colored dress to my wedding. Cream, I let it go. I let a lot of things go in those early years because I loved him, because I was young, and because I genuinely believed that love and patience could smooth down almost any rough edge. His father, I'll call him my father-in-law because I can't bring myself to use his name right now, made a toast at the reception. He talked for 8 minutes. He mentioned Philip 4 times, mentioned their family business 3 times, and mentioned me once, to say that he hoped I understood what I was marrying into. I smiled through the whole thing. My mom squeezed my hand under the table. The first 2 years of our marriage were mostly fine. Philip and I had our rhythms, our routines, our Saturday farmers market trips and Sunday morning pancakes. My business was growing. I'd brought on 2 contractors, expanded my client list, and was pulling in just under $200,000 a year by the time we hit our 2nd anniversary. I was proud of that. I built it from nothing, from a laptop and a savings account and a lot of late nights. His family was not impressed. That much was clear. My father-in-law had made his feelings about my career known through the particular technique of never asking about it. In 4 years of family dinners, he asked me exactly 0 direct questions about my work. He'd ask Philip sometimes, "How's Simone's little business?" but never me. My mother-in-law was more direct. She once told me, over brunch, that she thought it was admirable that I kept myself busy, like I was doing crafts. His older brother, my brother-in-law, was the worst of them. He had this way of speaking to me that always felt like he was explaining something I should already know. His wife was quiet and watchful and never seemed to be quite on my side, but never quite against me either. I used to try to get her alone at family events, hoping she might be an ally. She never fully committed. Philip was in the middle of all of it. He'd defend sometimes in a soft way that left a lot of room for doubt. "She works really hard," he'd say, and his father would nod like Philip had just told him I'd gotten a gold star on a spelling test. What I didn't know, what I had no idea about, was that while I was building my business and making my peace with his family's condescension and genuinely trying to make our marriage work, Philip had quietly started talking to his father about our finances. Not our finances, mine. That part I found out later, much later. After everything fell apart and I was sitting in my car in a parking garage trying to breathe through what I'd just discovered. Here's what happened. In February of last year, I got a letter from a bank I'd never heard of. It was addressed to me, at our home address, referencing a joint account that I had absolutely no knowledge of. The letter was some kind of standard annual disclosure. Routine enough that whoever set it up apparently hadn't thought twice about letting paper mail through. There was an account number. There was a balance. The balance was $47,000. I thought it was a mistake. I genuinely thought someone had gotten our address wrong, or there'd been some kind of data mix-up. I set the letter on my desk and told myself I'd call the bank to report an error. I didn't call that day. I got busy with a client call, then dinner, then Philip came home with Thai food, and we watched a show and I forgot about it entirely. But I'm a person who keeps things. I have a filing system in my office, physical folders, color-coded, going back to 2017, and I filed that letter under Miss Possible Errors, because that's just what I do. I document. I always have. My father used to say that paper is the only thing that doesn't change its story, and I took that to heart early. 2 weeks later, a second letter arrived from the same bank. This one referenced a transfer of $47,000. out of that account, to an account held by a corporation called Whitmore Legacy Holdings, LLC. I did not recognize that name. I sat down at my kitchen table and I typed that name into a search engine, and I did not find a website or a social media presence or a news mention. What I found after about 20 minutes of digging through state business records was a registered LLC in the state of Tennessee, formed 14 months prior, with 2 listed agents. One of them was my father-in-law, the other was my brother-in-law. I sat with that information for a long time. Then I went into my office, I closed the door, and I spent the next 3 hours going through every financial document I had access to, every bank statement, every tax form, every joint filing Philip and I had submitted together. I'm not a forensic accountant, but I'm not unintelligent, and I know how to read a spreadsheet, and what I found, buried across 18 months of records, were small, irregular transfers. Amounts between 800 and 3,000, sometimes twice a month, sometimes with gaps of 6 weeks. Always from joint accounts we held together, always to third-party accounts I couldn't immediately identify. The total, when I added up on a legal pad in my own handwriting, was just over $61,000. I did not confront Philip that night. I want to be honest about that, not because I was noble or strategic in that moment, but because I was scared. I was scared of what he would say. I was scared he'd have an explanation that I'd want to believe. I was scared that I'd already been believing things I shouldn't have for a long time, and I didn't know where that left me. So instead I called my best friend Jess, who had been a paralegal before she switched to real estate, and I read her what I'd found over the phone, and there was a long silence, and then she said, "Simone, you need a lawyer before you say a single word to him." I have taken a lot of good advice in my life. That was some of the best. I called an attorney the next morning. Her name is Miss Okafor, and she is the kind of woman who makes you feel like the other side has already lost before she's even heard the whole story. I explained everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said she wanted copies of everything and that I should not move any money, change any passwords, or alter anything about my behavior at home until we'd had a proper consultation. "Continue as normal," she said. "Go to dinner with them if you have to, smile. Don't give them any signal that you know." That weekend we had dinner at my in-laws' house. I sat across the table from my father-in-law, and I watched him pour wine and ask Philip about a property the firm was looking at, and talk about his brother's new car. My mother-in-law served brisket and asked if I'd been exercising because I looked tired. I said I'd been working a lot. She nodded like that explained a great deal. Philip touched my hand on the walk to the car. I let him. Over the next 6 weeks, Ms. Okafor and her team did what I could not. They found the paper trail I'd only partially seen. Whitmore Legacy Holdings had been set up, they discovered, with the express purpose of receiving transferred funds. Funds that in at least 3 documented cases were moved using credentials tied to joint accounts that Philip had access to. There was also a secondary issue involving a loan. A loan that had been taken against a property I co-owned with Philip, our investment property in East Nashville, without my signature on the final documents. That last part, the forged signature, that was when everything in me went quiet and cold in a way I've never felt before or since. Not angry, not devastated, just very, very clear. My mother-in-law called me the Thursday before everything came to a head. She said she was calling to invite me to a spa day. "Just the 2 of us," she said. She thought it might be nice to connect. I said that sounded lovely. I thanked her. I got off the phone and immediately called Miss Okafor's office. I'm not sure what the spa day was supposed to accomplish. Maybe she thought if she softened me up I'd be easier to deal with when things came out. Maybe it was genuine and I'm reading too much into it. What I know is that at the same time she was texting me a Pinterest board of robe options. Her husband and my brother-in-law were in a meeting with a lawyer, trying to figure out how quickly they could transfer the rest of what was in Whitmore Legacy Holdings to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. That's not my speculation. That's in the deposition. The morning of the mediation, because we went to mediation first, not court. I wore a navy blazer and I carried a folder. Miss Okafor was next to me. My father-in-law arrived with 2 attorneys. My brother-in-law was there. Philip was there. Nobody from their side looked at me when I walked in. The mediator opened the session. Their attorney started talking. He used phrases like marital misunderstanding and good faith financial decisions and family-level communication breakdown. I took notes on a legal pad and I did not interrupt. When it was our turn, Ms. Okafor said, We'd like to table the preliminary statements and move directly to documentation review. Their attorney said that wasn't typical procedure. Ms. Okafor said she understood, and would they prefer to see the bank records first or the property documents? The silence that followed that question was maybe 10 seconds long. It felt much longer. I slid the folder across the table. Their attorney took it. He opened it. He turned to page 3, the page with the forged signature on the loan documents, and I watched something shift in his expression. He turned to my father-in-law. My father-in-law looked at the table. My brother-in-law crossed his arms and leaned back in his chair like he was preparing an argument, but he didn't say anything. He just sat there. Philip, across the table, was looking at his own hands. Here's the thing nobody tells you about a moment like that. You think you'll feel triumphant. You've imagined it enough times, the reveal, the proof, the silence, and in your imagination it feels like winning. But sitting there in that conference room, looking at my husband staring at his hands, what I felt was something quieter and sadder and more permanent than triumph. I felt finished. Not in a defeated way, finished like a chapter that's done. Their attorney asked for a recess. Ms. Okafor said 15 minutes was fine. In the hallway I drank a cup of terrible coffee from a machine, and Jess, who had come to sit in the waiting area for moral support, gave me a hug and didn't say anything, which was exactly right. When we went back in, the tone had changed completely. The marital misunderstanding language was gone. The good faith framing was gone. What was left was the conversation you have when everyone in the room knows exactly what happened, and the only question is what happens next. It took 3 additional sessions and several weeks of back and forth, but here is what was ultimately resolved. The full amount that had been redirected through accounts I had not authorized was returned. The property in East Nashville, the one with the fraudulent loan documents, was transferred entirely into my name. Whitmore Legacy Holdings was dissolved, and Philip and I began the process of legal separation, which has since become a divorce. His family did not come out of it cleanly. There are ongoing legal matters I'm not going to get into because my attorney has advised me not to, but I'll say that what they attempted, and what they thought they'd gotten away with, has consequences that extend beyond a mediation session. My mother-in-law called me once after. She said she hoped I understood that none of it had been personal, that the family had simply been trying to protect what they'd built. I said I understood. I did not say more than that. Ms. Okafor had suggested I not discuss the matter with anyone on their side, and I am very good at following advice I trust. People ask me sometimes. My sister asked me just last month whether I'm angry, whether I wish I'd seen it sooner, done something differently, asked more questions earlier in the marriage. The honest answer is that I don't spend much time on that. Not because the anger isn't there, somewhere, but because what I've learned is that anger only has as much power as you let it take up space. And I've stopped giving things I didn't choose very much space in my life. What I think about instead is the filing cabinet in my office, the color-coded folders, the habit my dad gave me when I was 12 years old. Keep your receipts, keep your records, write the date on everything. He was talking about household budgets. He had no idea he was teaching me something that would one day mean I had a letter in a folder marked "Miss Possible Errors" that nobody expected me to have kept. I closed the business year up 18% over the previous year. I hired a third contractor. I moved into a condo near Germantown that I love in the specific way you love a space that is entirely yours. I'm not going to tell you everything is fine now because I think that kind of ending is dishonest, and I've had enough dishonesty in my recent past to last me a while. There are nights I lie awake and replay conversations and wonder about the person I was at that brunch when my in-law called me admirable, and I smiled and let it go. I think about her in the cream dress at my wedding. I think about Philip's hand on mine in the parking lot of his parents' house, while inside his family was planning what to do with my money. But here's what I also know. The documents were ready, they were always ready. Not because I'm paranoid or suspicious by nature, but because some part of me, some instinct I maybe should have listened to louder and sooner, understood that the only person you can ever fully count on to protect what you've built is yourself. So you keep the records. You date the documents. You trust your instincts when they speak quietly before they have to start screaming. And when someone slides a folder back across a conference table toward you with shaking hands, you don't have to say a single word. The paper already said it for you.